So now moving into the next panel for today, as we know that EdTech has wonderfully entwined in learning with technology, which has also led to a plethora of benefits for students. It has made education more accessible, costless, give individuals the choice to learn a variety of topics. So these are some of the ideas with which we kept in mind, and our next panel discussion will be on the disruptive trends in EdTech and the various aspects of digital innovation. So quickly introducing the panelists for the session, their detailed bios and links to their LinkedIn profiles are available in the chat box in the interest of time. The speakers for this session are Imran Jafar, Managing Partner at Gaja Capital, Preethaa Ganesh, Vice President at Wells Group of Institutions, and also a Mumbai Angels member, Shreyasi Singh, Founder and CEO of Harappa Education, and the panel will be moderated by our event chair, Joel Pannikot, who's the head of CMTS of India. So over to you, Joel.
Thank you so much, Shivangi, and welcome to Preetha, Shreyasi, Imran. Such a pleasure to have you for this conversation. So before we get started, let me take just 1 minute and lay a quick context to this session and how it connects to the one before and the one after, because really I feel that we are at the connective tissue of some tremendous change. We spoke previously about the education landscape as it is, what entrepreneurs are doing, where opportunities could potentially lie. But I'm often reminded as the world evolves and as technology becomes more and more prevalent of the industry of photographic film and photography. I mean, Kodak was a world leader at one time, and suddenly one fine day it almost ceased to exist till it made dramatic pivots. What is very fascinating is that there is nothing that we can take for granted today in terms of the continuity of not just individual businesses, but entire industries. And Clayton Christensen talks about this in his wonderful work, The Innovator's Dilemma, and talks about how co-innovation, social trends, behavioral trends have all been playing a part in dramatic changes in the industry, in various industries, practically everyone. Technology probably is likely to impact in education in ways that we still cannot foresee. But that is what we're trying to achieve with this conversation. With Shreyasi, Imran, and Preetha, I'm really hoping that we can talk about what are these changes, what are we looking forward to, and let me put it in a slightly controversial way. What does the current education establishment have to fear from everything that's happening in the world, and what could cause large disruptions? So I'll start with Preetha, and I want to just, for the benefit of the audience, Preetha's dialing in from Chennai right now. Dialing in, I'm that old. Preetha's calling in from Chennai, and Chennai is in the midst of a cyclone right now, so she's having some trouble with connectivity. So during the conversation, she might have to switch her video off, but I know that she'll be very present through it. But let's start with you, Preetha. Based on your context and your experience, speaking to the topic of disruptive trends, what do you see as trends that are impacting you? Maybe you can take a moment to talk about what you do and what are the trends that you are seeing that are impacting the work you do.
Okay. Thank you, Joel, for that really kind introduction, and for Mumbai Angels for having me. And so we know that technology is impacting our lives in every aspect. And not long ago, the education industry was just using chalk and talk method to teach. But now we see lots of change in everything we do. Long ago, digital technology meant just using an iPad or a tablet instead of the board. But now there's augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, voice-based learning. There's just so much for us educationists also to learn. So I think the societal and behavioral factors that impact us the most would start off with like the way parenting is nowadays, and how parents are forced to say yes to their children in in all things, and the concept of slow, gradual gratification does not exist. So children instantly want results, and their attention span has drastically reduced. So this in turn has kind of led us educators and edtech people to give on-point content that kind of like grasps their attention, engages with them, and is more immersive for them to like involve themselves and learn as such. And secondly, the impact of AI on all our lives. So now bots are taking over the world, and 5 million jobs have been lost because of automation. Although this is kind of like freeing up us to do more high level, high value tasks, this is also kind of changing the nature of the jobs in the job market. So that kind of forces us to reinvent ourselves and unlearn, relearn, and yeah, just make the best of situation and upgrade ourselves constantly.
Thank you so much, Preetha. And it makes a lot of sense because obviously, as an organization that works with students, you made a very good point about the behavior changes in parenting itself is having a tremendous influence on education as it is. Let me move over to Shreyasi because Shreyasi, you and I also had this very interesting conversation that I wanted to touch upon. What are your thoughts on the disruptions or disruptive trends that are taking place, and how are you dealing with it as Harappa?
Thanks, Joel, and thank you to Mumbai Angels for having me on the panel. I really think for EdTech and for online learning, there's going to be a pre-corona reality and a post-corona reality. I think it isn't surprising that obviously it has disrupted centuries-old way of teaching almost overnight and have had to cope with it. I think what's really interesting to think about is in the last 9 months, every learner in the world, every educator in the world, and every university, school administrator, or any school system, education system administrator has had to be exposed to, learn, and try and figure out some aspect of online learning. I think that's a pretty massive change. I think I can't imagine a situation in which in a condensed period, I mean, 6 months is nothing in the history of the world. In a really condensed period of 6 months, we have all become either online educators or online learners or have to deal with. I think that's huge cultural shift. There's a huge mindset shift. So I think that, and we're all sort of all first generation online learners and first generation online educators, still grappling with it. So I think that is the biggest shift. I think the most positive impact for online learning in this year has been that everybody has experienced it to some level. Now, obviously, everyone's experience of it and whatever sort of online, whether as an educator, whether as an administrator, as a learner, has been patchy, right? Some people love the autonomy and access of it. Most people miss their fellow colleagues. Teachers have really struggled. Kudos to teachers who have had to, without any training, try and do this. I'm also a parent. I have a 14-year-old, so I feel sorry for his teachers when they have to put together a class of teenagers and manage that, right? All of that, it says. So I think that is the biggest shift. Second is, I think we have to understand, I really feel like when it comes to online learning, we're at the beginning of the civilization. And I'm just using a civilization terminology, given that we're called Harappa. And we really hope to be sort of pioneering a new way or a new frontier of learning. That things are going to get much better very quickly. The fact that we have, that there's been such an adoption and everybody has experienced it, I think the feedback from it and what didn't work and what worked is going to be so massive that it's almost like how we used to watch movies in black and white. And I guess I'm not as old as having watched movies only in black and white. But in terms of evolution of the cinematic experience, right, from black and white to IMAX, I think in online learning and the experiences and immersiveness that is up ahead of us, I think we're only scratching the surface. So I think that's a big thing, that we have a lot of excitement ahead of us, and it's been incredible these last 6 months to be able to see everybody interact with online learning in some way. I think that's, to me, the two most challenging things: the potential available and the lived experience of all of humanity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shreyasi. And I think it makes a lot of sense. These two events have just changed so much in the past few years. I think that sets the stage very well for Imran as well. And Imran, from your perspective as an investor, are you seeing cracks in the old ecosystem? And are you seeing rays shining through that will displace the old ecosystem and create a new one? And please share your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Excellent insights from Preetha and Shreyasi as well. See, we've just a quick sense of what we do. We've spent 15 years investing in education fairly systematically, and we've invested across the board. So we made investments in core K-12 schools, in K-12 ancillary companies, for example, a company called Sports Village, which offers sports and fitness programs to children. It's the largest such platform in India. Educational initiatives that offers assessment and adaptive learning solutions to schools. And we've invested in test prep, supplemental, higher education, and so on. So, you know, when we look at education, our conviction for the last 15 years, and we've been shouting from rooftops for the last 15 years, is that India is the most attractive private education market in the world. And I almost feel like I'm a stuck record because I've been saying this for 15 years, but I'm very confident that through this period, I don't think COVID has created a new market. It has accelerated what we always believed for a very long time were the underlying underpinnings of the most attractive education market in the world. So when you look at the old, so-called old economy world and the emergence of new EdTech companies with technology at the bedrock of what they do, I see that more as an acceleration as opposed to a displacement. It is true that during COVID, there has been an acceleration, and I can share a few numbers. Pre-COVID in 2019, there were less than 30 million EdTech users in total. That was the total universe of users that you could sell to. But shockingly, out of 28 million EdTech users, there were just about 1.2 million paid users, which means you had a very large population that was just used to getting EdTech for free. And as a result, you had a tiny market. You had a $250 million market. And in the year 2022, if you look at current trends and acceleration during COVID, that 28 million EdTech user base is looking more like 110 million. But more interestingly, the 1.2 million paid user base is likely to be 12 million paid users. So there's a 10x in the paid user base. And if there was one thing to take away from the COVID acceleration, it's this, that people have had a large scale inducement and a willingness to pay for EdTech, which is the game changer and is likely to stick even after the pandemic recedes. And so now this starts to look interesting even for global investors. And if you look at the money typically follows the market, and you can see now India and China account for 70% of total EdTech VC investments. This is pretty significant because until recently, the US and China dominated venture capital investing. So over the next decade, just to share a few projections for you, we believe that the Indian private equity and venture capital market per year for education and EdTech put together will increase from less than $1 billion to more like a $5 billion market per year. So if there are entrepreneurs on this in the audience, you might have a whole laundry list of excuses, but the lack of funding is not going to be one of them. You're going to be flush with capital. Investors are going to chase good ideas. And I think it's a great time to be an education entrepreneur. It's a great time to build businesses in education. And I will just summarize by saying, don't obsess too much about disruptive trends, but focus on the shelf life of what those trends are delivering ultimately to the student, because this is a serious business. In a recent survey, which I thought was very interesting, they asked EdTech users, what do they value? And 3 out of their top 5 criteria had nothing to do with convenience and value, which is typical if you're a grocery player or an e-commerce player. People are looking for discounts and convenience. In education, it's about quality of content, quality of teachers, and ultimately efficacy.
So much, Imran. That was very insightful, and thanks for bringing kind of a quantifiable context to the space and the scale of this opportunity. I think everyone must be salivating. The entrepreneurs must be salivating at just thinking of the sheer growth in an addressable market. But I'll come back to you, Imran, and then circle back, because I also want your perspective on what of the old guard then. I mean, while entrepreneurs are looking at opportunities, because I want this to end with Preethaa, because this is part of the conversation we've had. But what of the old guard in that now that models are changing, now that digital learning has become prevalent, and people are willing to pay outside the traditional, monolithic system of education. What now for them? How can, how do you see, traditional organizations adapting to this?
So let me take an example of schools because that's close to our heart. I mean, we've got 1.5 million schools. We all know that a very large number of those, actually the dominant share of those are government schools. And in government schools, you're right. Today, if you look at EdTech from the lens of government schools, the usage and the adoption of EdTech is abysmally low. It's almost tragic that while we talk about the excitement and the billions of dollars and all of that, in the private sector, unfortunately, the poor in our nation just don't have the infrastructure, namely smartphones or broadband, to access all this wonderful content. And a lot of this content is available for free, but they just don't have the pipes to their homes to be able to access it. So you have a very tragic situation for the vast majority of Indians. But for the private schools, to answer your question specifically, there is a huge opportunity for brick and mortar K-12 schools that so far had almost hostages instead of customers for a decade or more in their school system, with parents having absolutely no choice. Today, if I was a school owner, I would be a little paranoid. I think it's a very healthy thing, but I would look at the opportunity, and the opportunity is how relevant can a K-12 school brand be after school? Because now schools are no longer about the physical infrastructure. They're no longer about the physical timetable of a school or the academic calendar. And so there are school chains today that have the balance sheet strength, that have the corporate resources to be able to think beyond their physical school campuses to see how can I get a piece of the after school tutoring market? How can I create a platform where I bring in K-12 ancillary companies, in a revenue share model, so that can become a long-term wealth creation opportunity for me. So one specific example for you is how, what can K-12 brands do to stay relevant after school? And you're seeing this in higher education as well. Shreyasi runs a company that is perhaps at the cutting edge of that trend, that, the good old higher education campus, or what I call the Harvard, Stanford model is over, right? You don't have large endowments, you don't have capital to invest in large campuses. So how can you reinvent yourself in the virtual world while still delivering what higher education is about, which is social interaction, networking, and joint collaborative problem solving. Minerva used to be, I don't know how they're doing now, but Ben had created at least 7 or 8 years ago a very exciting proposition to take on the Harvards of the world in a pure digital online format. And many people discredited that vision at that time. And look at where we are today. There are several entrepreneurs executing plans, and many will succeed, I believe.
Precisely. And I think this harks back to Dr. Shrikant Datar's book, I think about 10 years ago now, where he spoke about the traditional MBA and why that is probably on its way to the grave. And he specifically brought up the Harvard model, which ironically has become the model that's followed all around the world without that contextualization that's important for, for education to be relevant, even at the higher ed level, and let alone, the K-12 journey. And I want to bring you in, Shreyasi, at this point, because, like I said, you also feel very strongly about this. And what do you see as the next change? As like Imran said, if the old guard is at risk right now, unless they adopt, what kind of changes do you see at your end of the spectrum?
Listening to Imran, I live in Delhi on a smoggy, dark, gray winter evening is really warms the heart, and everything that he's been talking about. I think completely true on the K-12. As a parent as well, I can think of this great unbundling of the school. I mean, if your child is gifted in maths, you get him an amazing maths teacher. For sports, they can go somewhere else. They get breadth of curriculum, which is what schools essentially proposition was, and I completely agree. Given the private school, some students and parents were hostage for 12 years. I think on the higher education, absolutely. And I think something else Imran said that really struck out at me from a different angle. I think we're technology enabled, of course, at Harappa. And first of all, we're an online learning institution that has created a curriculum framework that actually does not exist even in the offline model, because we believe really the half-life of sort of all the cool technologies that keep coming up and we all keep referring to and talking about. The fact is that really to have individuals who can have any chance of reaching their potential, they're not that very different skills that you have to teach people, or what we all use in our interactions to be able to achieve our aspirations. That's why we believe very strongly in curriculum innovation, content delivery. What does pedagogy look like in an in an online format? How do you do storytelling truly, which is engaging, that can lead to learning outcomes? I think there's such a convergence of technology, education, storytelling that I think we've created, and just a new kind. I think the old guard has not taught us, whether it's school systems and certainly higher education systems, where we hope to come in for sure, has not taught you the foundational skills that you really need. So, for example, our curriculum on really being able to think, problem solve, communicate, collaborate, and lead yourself. It's almost shocking to me that even MBA colleges, which do a little bit of this more than any other stream, fall so woefully short that we have all kinds of data and statistics on unemployability, 70% of the people quitting their jobs in the first year because the fit is not there. And just so much, I think, what is the curriculum? What do we really want people to learn? Not what are we giving them as content to pass one exam to another, class 7 to class 8, NEET, JEE, whatever it is that you do, right? What are the, I think that's one very exciting trend where I think new online learning players and online educators, I think, have a chance to play. I think that's a true opportunity we have in front of us as online educators, is that we don't stop learning at 23. Chris Dede, also a professor at Harvard, said something in his book, The 60-Year-Old Curriculum, that I really is a goalpost for me to think about. The colleges have to stop pretending that your first job, that you will not have 6 or 7 jobs in your life now. You often have 6 to 7 careers. I'm a formal journalist, non-techie, non-MBA, running a digital business. I've had to learn all kinds of skills. As a working mother, I can't give up everything to go and start doing any other courses. So I think just the sheer variety of courses, formats, experiences, something on how to build dashboards, I will do a 2-week course on. Something that I want to do, go deeper in, be the best people leader, I will do a 3-month online course to begin with, and then get a coach for 1-to-1, and that coach can either be virtual. I think we have to really unlock the understanding and the possibilities of a wide variety of learning formats, learning experiences, and skills that are truly relevant for us. And absolutely use technology, or especially the fashionable technology, only when it really serves and supports the learner into what the learning outcome is. What are you really trying to do? One last thing, I think, as educators, that we can't sort of get away from is really, and really is a core business, I feel, is what do we really understand about learner motivation, and how do we instill that? I think the true innovation is not going to be on anything else, but the true innovation can be on what can technology you or any online educator can do to truly instill motivation and engagement on learning journeys and learning experiences, offline. Even offline hasn't cracked it. Obviously, as we know, we're all products of systems that have been faulty at large and often damaging at worst, right? So I think learner motivation, curriculum innovation, content delivery are all things the old guard has to be careful of, and newer institutions like us have a great opportunity to do some good work in.
It's almost scary to listen to both of you from one end of the spectrum, and at the other, it is so teeming with opportunity. Because Shreyasi, what I heard from a lot of what you said is, while there is all this technology and all this change happening, the big questions about the first principles of learning, learner motivation, the very human experience of, like I keep insisting, being alive. And there's always this conversation I've been having now for the past decade about, is technology displacing humans, or taking humans, taking away jobs from humans. My argument is always that it's not so much taking away jobs from humans, but taking away the more dehumanizing jobs that people have been doing in our larger Macaulay-driven, mass-produced world. And by extension, that's probably forcing us to do things that involve creativity, imagination, human connection. And by that extension, technology is probably returning humanity to humans. But this is a very nice, we brought it to a nice space where I want to bring Preethaa in. And Preethaa, you run educational institutions that run the entire gamut from K-12 all the way beyond. How are you, as a group of institutions, how are you dealing with this? How are you, adapting to this change and protecting against disruption?
I completely agree with the other two panelists about the need in the change of, need for change in the curriculums. And this age, knowledge has been democratized, so it's freely available on the internet. So you can learn from Google, YouTube, videos, podcasts. So that kind of changes the role of a teacher. There's been a paradigm shift in the last decade. So now the teacher is no more a knowledge owner or disseminator, but rather a facilitator of knowledge. And with the kind of new jobs that have been created and automation and everything coming in, a study by the World Economic Forum has said that 65% of the children entering primary schools today will not find jobs that they've been preparing for in the future. And to kind of like help the youth today, we need to leverage our existing school systems and use more effective learning methodologies and prepare them for the unseen jobs of tomorrow. And this not only means that we update our curriculum around AI and its competencies, but also we should focus on things like collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and compassion, because these things cannot be replaced by AI, as Shreyasi rightly pointed out. And another thing is that personalization can really be a game changer in the future. And the biggest disruption in the education sector will be the demolition of the one size fits all approach, in my opinion.
Thanks, Preethaa. And you're very right. So just before this role, like I was saying, I was running a social media EdTech, social enterprise in the EdTech space that specifically built personalized learning platforms. But like classic disruptive models, had to operate at the edge cases, at places where people did not have a choice in terms of what kind of digital learning or technology they could use. And even the educators who did not have a choice but have to adopt such tools. And slowly but surely, we are seeing this move mainstream. Like you mentioned, Preethaa, artificial intelligence, and I know you as a computer engineer are very fascinated by technology. I think this opens up a tremendous opportunity for you to bring tech into this personalized space. And this, I think, is where classic education institutions will be able to deliver a different learning experience while continuing to remain relevant. Imran made a very good point about the balance sheet strength. And that is perhaps where there is this opportunity for collaboration, not just between investors like Imran and entrepreneurs that are coming without a background, but perhaps some kind of a marriage between building technologies versus buying it. Finding small solutions which eventually larger institutions with balance sheets can then develop on their own. And there are all these opportunities now, I think, that can be explored. And with that in mind, I want to shift gears slightly with all our panelists and do a bit of a rapid fire round, an association game, if you want to call it that, just to see where your headspace is and what might people be able to take away, what might entrepreneurs and investors listening in be able to take away in terms of what is on top of your mind. So I'll go in order, starting with Preethaa. So the game is basically, I'll say a word or two, and at the end of it, I'll say a word or two, and I want you to say the first word that comes to your mind in response to that. And I'll go in circles, so I'd request all four of you to keep your mics on. And at the end of it, there is no coffee hamper.
What's the point?
Exactly. If not coffee, what else? So, Preetha, artificial intelligence.
Insights for personalized learning.
Insights. Shreyasi, teaching.
Responsibility.
Imran, opportunity.
Huge. The largest, most attractive in the
Wonderful.
world.
Preetha, school.
Temple of learning.
Shreyasi, culture.
Eat strategy for breakfast, as they say, is everything.
Imran, risks.
To be managed.
Sorry, come again. I lost you for a second.
Risks are to be managed.
Next. Preetha, let's think of a nice one. School, yeah.
Sorry, did you already ask me that?
Yeah, Preetha, school.
Yeah, I already said it was the temple of learning.
Well, I think we covered
Oops, I missed school. I'm going in loops now. Okay.
No problem.
Preetha, okay, career. Career.
Rewarding.
Shreyasi, employability.
A big challenge for India, and I have a career one. Can I a image that came to mind? Really taken from my career. Not a ladder, but a jungle gym. You know, you move linearly, you go down, you go up, you do lots of
Brownian motion, right?
things.
Imran, policy.
I mean, I'd like to see changer if it changes, but I'd leave it at that.
Preetha, robotics.
The future.
Shreyasi, robotics.
Always been around. I think know where to use it best.
Imran, robotics.
Some time away.
Great. So I'll take a break with this round of questions, but I think it's very interesting. So thank you so much for participating. Like I said, hampers all around whenever we get around to it. For now, maybe virtual hampers in PDF. But here's the interesting thing, right? Everything that we were talking about was to do with first principles, and I think that's a learning that for everyone, whether it's investors or entrepreneurs on this in the audience, should maybe take away is that as we are looking for opportunities within the space and opportunities in terms of where entrepreneurs can find business ideas and where investors can potentially invest and in ideas that they trust. I think this is something to remember. First principles, learning, the learning life cycle, because the education technology space in itself caters to so much more than just formal traditional learning, right? There are gaps from one milestone to the other that can be addressed in so many ways. There are opportunities, not just, and this is something I find very interesting, not just for the learner, but for the teacher themselves. One of the last software projects that I was working on with Zaya was creating a teacher coaching and management platform. And maybe there is something, just supporting teachers in doing their job better, irrespective of whether in the formal sector or the informal, whether it's the socioeconomically elite or backward. There is a lot more that maybe teachers need in order to make the learning journey far more important. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite each of the three panelists to share your closing thoughts about the discussion we've had and what you see as trends going forward that organizations need to be mindful of. And eventually then I'll invite Shivangi to join in and deliver her ideas on this. Preetha, starting with you once again.
Yeah, majority of the audience is investors. I would just recommend them all to invest in EdTech because the global market's about to reach 404 billion US dollars in the next 5 years. And one solid indicator that EdTech is a good investment is the sheer number of billionaires that were created lately. And although a lot of people say that India is a developing country, there's no scope for EdTech, there's the huge digital divide, I would say that all that is short term and it's closing in with more initiatives like Geo and Digital India, Skill India coming up. And for teachers who are listening, I think they shouldn't stick to conventional methods of teaching, but they also need to be tech savvy and well versed to make the optimum use of technology. And yeah, in light of a shift towards a more personalized learning experience, teachers have to don multiple roles. They should be prepared to be data collectors, analysts, planners, probably collaborators, curriculum experts, problem solvers, and researchers too. And in my opinion, technology and physical learning technology can only complement physical learning, but not completely replace it in the near future at least. And classrooms of the future will become phygital. That term is becoming more popular, and which is a combination of, again, physical and digital classrooms or learning. And this should provide a seamless offline online integration. And the positive aspects of both should be integrated and made use of. So I think institutions should focus on changing trends and start adapting to new technologies to make education interesting, relevant, and practical for all the students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Preetha. That's extremely insightful. And I think this is why Shivangi was telling me that Mumbai Angels also is very proud to have you as a member. Wonderful. Shreyasi, over to you.
Let me, I think Peter has given a great wrap up of sort of the overall opportunity. Let me share my experiences as an EdTech entrepreneur, since everyone is exhorting EdTech entrepreneurs and hoping for the people like us to be successful, which feels great to have that kind of support and team build on our side. I think one thing in the last 6-7 months that has been really interesting at Harappa Education for us is we had a course called Embracing Change. It was a course built on principles of positive psychology and on concepts of grit, setback, and resilience. Even before we all went into lockdown in India completely on March 22nd, on March 16th, we made that asynchronous self-paced online course around 4.5 hours long, available for free, and committed to make that free for all of 2020. And I remember before when we were building the content for this course a year and a half back, we're just a 2.5-year-old company, people say, my God, what a floozy course and who's going to take it and things like that. And what has been so heartening for me is a course like that which just became so resonant of the times that we've got 150,000 learners on that course. 10,000 learners have completed that course. And we have an average course feedback rating from that course in 4.6 out of 5. So I no longer make judgments on what is floozy or not and what learners need or not and what kind of content that they will access, which is really, and learners from 18 to 50, 55. So that's one. Second, in the middle of the pandemic, we decided, we were largely B2B, we decided to go B2C, given that we didn't want to delay the learnings that we will get from the acceleration and the adoption that was happening thanks to digitalization. On a Thinking Critically course, largely built, that we had built, keeping the 20 to 30-year-old in mind. Our largest number of paid learners on that course are people from 45 to 55-year-olds. So now at Harappa, we have the incredible, and this is what I guess what lifelong learning looks like. We talk about it, but it looked like is that we actually have learners from 18 to 55, which again has opened my mind to really the possibilities, and especially with our kind of curriculum. None of us can think to be masters on courses like Leading Self and Thinking Critically and Making Decisions, which are all courses that Harappa has again opened up my mind. Third, I think just the holy grail of the EdTech problem was really around completion and true engagement, right? And will people be able to finish a journey? That was the inheritance of the MOOC and an urban legend almost. And I think that was really about investment. If you don't pay, you don't take it seriously. And I think engagement numbers and completion numbers are going up very significantly. And one of the things that I'm proudest of is building something we call internally the nudge engine, really based on principles of branding, behavior science, and marketing communications to be able to drive really high completion. So people can learn, people do finish. We have within 90 days of course start upwards of 85% of course completions on with some of our cohorts. So I think the three things that I'm really excited by as an EdTech entrepreneur and all the investors looking to invest and sort of really wanting to support us, where to look. No, that's a joke, but is don't assume on what curriculum people want. Don't assume who will learn, and don't assume that people will not be engaged. They can be, and they can love the experience.
That is so hopeful, Shreyasi, your message for for EdTech entrepreneurs, and but it's also I think a very tough act to emulate. In that we all start as entrepreneurs with a notion of what we want to build and the change we want to see in the world, and perhaps that is not the change the world wants to see. So finding that little balance between the dent you want to put in the universe and the dent the universe is ready for. I think you embody that learning very well, that you have been able to learn from your audience and you have been able to adopt and create a platform where more content and more opportunities are available for learners, no matter what their interests are. So that's, I think, fabulous. And that's something I think entrepreneurs on this call should also take away, is that listening to your audience, your market, people whom you call your users, although I find that term a little derogatory, is so incredibly important, right? And I think that is where tremendous amounts of opportunity lies, even as the world shifts from what we understood to be the old guard to what we hope will be the new. But Imran, would you like to close that off with your thoughts?
Thank you, Joel. No, I'll say three things. One is there's a tsunami of consumer spend coming your way. In the last 18 years, India added $1 trillion of consumer spend. That number is going to be $4 to $5 trillion per year by 2030, and COVID might, shift that by a bit. But we're going to be the third largest consumer economy in the world, and we're hurtling towards that happy place. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, you're working in an exciting education company, remember that this is an opportunity of a lifetime, and give it your 100%. The second thing I'll tell you is that education is a serious business. This is not media and entertainment. It's certainly not entertainment, and nothing to take away from these wonderful businesses. But this is a serious business. It's like healthcare. And so be prepared to stick it out for the long term. If you feel like sprinting, remember that you can't sprint a marathon. Pace yourself. And like Joel reminded us, sometimes it takes multiple attempts to get it right, because you're picking one of the largest problems that humanity is confronting today. And if you solve it, you will create tremendous value. And I'll finally say that to give you an example from theater or from healthcare, if you go and, I don't know if many of you like theater, I certainly miss theater now during COVID because I can't go and watch a play. But in theater, you can have the most high-tech sound and lighting and digital music and all of that. But ultimately, it boils down to the relationship between two people, the actor and the audience. And education is like that. It boils down to the relationship between teacher and her student. Healthcare is like that. It boils down to the relationship between doctor and patient. Don't forget that. So as you think about the bells and whistles of technology, please understand that technology should be used to boost this relationship at the heart of education, which is between teacher and student. I wish you all the very best, and I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you so much, Imran. I think you've taken a lot out of the tech and added a lot more to the ed in terms of how people, balance this portfolio in their mind. But I think these are some tremendous insights from all three of you. Preetha, please stay safe once again, you and your family and everyone you know. Shivangi, over to you. Closing comments.
I think, firstly, thank you, Preetha, Shreyasi, and Imran for taking time out. I think at a personal level and even as Mumbai Angels, there are significant insights to take. So Shreyasi, I think incidentally, I have also donned multiple hats in my career. I actually started as a derivatives trader, briefly into consulting. I volunteered for 7 years pro bono before starting out my own company and into corporate investor relations. And now here I am at Mumbai Angels. And I totally resonate with the fact that sometimes you have to learn on the job, and how well you do it actually determines the path that you will take. So I think education plays an important role in that, because you obviously can't go back to school always and learn. This is not to take away from the relevance of formal methods and institutions of learning, because they play a very important role in forming the basis of which careers and individuals can take off. And I think even from an investment perspective, what Imran said is very, very true, that we need not forget that there's a fundamental in this entire business of education, that you need to have a very, very good product which needs to resonate with the audience or the consumer in this case. Because if that connection is not made, then whatever is the packaging, you can only sell that much of it. Because if there's nothing real and there's no real takeaway, eventually the business will fail. And also, we've seen also as a platform that any good business which is built on strong fundamentals does succeed in the long run. And I think what I can gather from the panel is more that the time for EdTech is now. We are at an inflection point. It has been, I think, forwarded a bit for various factors. One of them is COVID. And I'm sure there are a lot of other factors as well, which include our population dynamics, the way we are growing as an economy. So I think for the founders out there, this is a very, very useful insight that you can take. You have this opportunity. There is no excuse because there is a market yet. Please do take heed from the caution that the panelists have given out. Build a strong business, build a good product, and there are enough takers for it, both in terms of investors and also a consumer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shivangi. I think on that note, once again, Shreyasi, Preetha, Imran, it's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I really think this is not where the dialogue stops. This is just where this begins. And this is something that I think we can build on going forward as well. Thank you once again for your time.